When you're working on Wazdakka, I definitely think it's important to work on it in sub-assemblies. So I've got the majority of the bike attached to the base, and I've got all these other parts separated. I separated them by the front of the bike, the rider, a piece under the bike, the grot, as well as the smoke. But the video today is going to focus on Wazdakka and his skin. And we'll start that off with a base mixture of Sick Green by Vallejo Game and Death World Forest by Warhammer Color. So we'll take that mixture, thin it down a little bit with some water, and then apply it as a base coat. And while the color of this mixture is great, unfortunately it does not apply super well over a black primer. So you're going to want to do multiple coats, even third, maybe fourth. A solid saturated base is going to be very important as we move on. From that base, we're going to start shading by mixing in some Oxidation Green by 2 thin coats in with our Death World Forest. That oxidation will give it a slightly blue tint, which will be nice for shadows. And for our shading, we want to glaze it in. And it's very important that your paint is thin for this. We're not doing a wash, we're doing glazes. And what that's going to do is it's going to create very subtle, soft shading. While you're painting this, it should feel like it's not doing much at all. And that might feel like a frustrating waste of time, but it will be worth it in the end. We're going to create really great transitions by using layers in this shading process. As you can see here, my first layer is dry and I'm starting to go in with a second glaze of the same color. What that's going to do is it's going to add a lot of saturation to the color, so it's going to make it more vivid and pronounced, which will ultimately improve the quality of the shadows. Now you can add a little bit more of that Oxidation Green in if you want to add a little bit more blueness to the color. Play around with your mixture. And when you're working on your layers, you want your first layer to be a smaller amount of coverage. That way, when you come in with your second layer, that small area of coverage will get that increased saturation, while the outer area that you add more to will just get a nicer blend. And you can see that in the bottom of this peck. And this is what the model looks like at the first go of shading with that previous formula, although various mixtures of it. There's some nice shadowing and color in here, but we're going to take it even further with our next step. And for that, we're going to add some Curious Leather, or any dark brown really works, into that previous mixture and glaze with that. And with this, you definitely want to be more reserved and use it to really define some of those darker recesses to really give them a shadowed quality. This is really more for those areas that are mostly absent of light rather than just slightly shadowed. And for those areas that are mostly not visible, just feel free to add more brown and have it much darker. And that makes sense when you think about the values of the thing you're painting. Those areas won't have any sun hitting, so they're good to be darker. But now we're going to move on to highlighting, and for that we're going to use Elysian Green by Warhammer Color. You're going to apply this very similarly to the shadows. You're going to want extra thin paint and work very slowly and carefully. I'm working with brush strokes going upwards as well as dot stippling. The direction of your brush strokes really matters, so make sure they are going upwards towards your light source. This is going to be important for the blend to make sense. And one of the things you can do is kind of sketch these muscles or whatever, and then start to add in the color in between your brighter sketches. And I'm doing that by stippling, which I like because it creates an interesting texture. It's one of my personal favorites, but you can just glaze if you want to. And this is what it can look like after that first highlight. And it is subtle, but I've only painted the top of the muscles of that arm. But regardless, we're going to want it brighter, and for that we can just add more of the same color highlight to really punch in the color. And you can see me doing that here. I'm just adding the same color over the top of the pecs after the previous highlight has dried, and it's really just saturating it further and making it much more vivid and intense. And sometimes there are limits to how much you can saturate with the same color. So for here, we're adding some Serpent Eye Yellow by 2 thin coats, and we're further highlighting the model. Now you can see me doing some downward brush strokes. Don't do it. It's not the end of the world if you do. Obviously, my model still looks good in my opinion, but it would look better if all of your brush strokes were going towards that source of light. But with this brighter color, you're going to want to do more refined brush strokes, paint less, and it'll really impact with contrast. If you overdo it, you can really drown out all that work you did shading. Now for these more rounded areas, I definitely prefer stippling over brush strokes because it can help make it look rounded. It's a simple way to get big results. And if you feel like you over highlighted, feel free to glaze your shadow back in there. Make sure it's not a whole lot, that you don't ruin your highlights, but it can definitely help bringing things back together in a way that makes sense. Seriously, when you do this, make sure your paint is extremely thin so it just doesn't ruin everything you just did. We're going to further highlight by taking our Legion Green, our Serpent Eye Yellow, and some Ice Yellow and mixing them together. Now when we mixed just the Serpent Eye Yellow in, it created a nice brighter color. But when we only mix Ice Yellow in, it creates a bright color without that yellow saturation, which is what we don't want yet. So that's why we're still keeping that Serpent Eye Yellow in. And once again, it's the exact same process as our previous highlight. You're just doing less and you're keeping it more refined, smaller brush strokes, better control. This highlight's not just for brightening it up. You really want to use these brighter colors to help define your muscles. You're going to be hitting some harder lines and then making them quite a bit more of a stark contrast. And that'll be great for emulating bulging muscles. But one of the most important areas to highlight with this brightness is the face. We want everyone's attention drawn here, so the brightness will really help with that. Be precise, steady. I suggest keeping your elbows on your desk and your hands kind of pressed together. And just kind of take your time. With showcase pieces like this, you know, it's going to take a while. Just be patient. And once you're happy with that highlight, we'll finally add just that Ice Yellow with the Elysian Green, and we're going to do some very small dot highlights, especially on the face. But you'll also be wanting to hit some of those top areas of the muscles. For the lips, we're going to be doing a very, very thin glaze of AK 3rd Gen's Violet Red, and you'll want your brush strokes going from the corners of the mouth down to the bottom of the lip. This glaze being so thin will really create a fantastic looking transition that you can see here. But we do want the lips to be more saturated, so take some less thinned of that Violet Red and just add it towards the lips. Additionally, we're using this color on the ears as well as the nose. To highlight, we're going to take a mixture of that Violet Red with a basic skin tone. I'm using Dwarven Skin by Two Thin Coats. And the lips already has these grooves, so just kind of follow along with them and highlight the edges of them while leaving shadows in between. And specifically for the nose, I take some pure Dwarven flesh and just do a dot on the top and then mess up and fix it. But for the lips, we just add some Ice Yellow into our mixture of Violet Red and Dwarven Skin, and we just do some smaller highlights. So effectively, these will just be kind of little dot highlights that really help define it. Time warp for the inside of the mouth, we're going to take some Screamer Pink and fully saturate it. It is probably better to do this before you do the lips. I just felt like the lips were part of the skin, so I included it earlier. If you hate that, tell me in the comments down below. But we're going to then do the teeth, and I'm going to use Sandstone by Two Thin Coats. And we're just going to paint the whole of the teeth. We're then going to take Agrax Earthshade and we're going to douse the entire thing. Get it all up in there, make sure you get up in between the teeth, but don't hit your lips. You can then re-highlight the tongue with Serpent Eye Yellow and our Screamer Pink. And to highlight it further, you can just add in a little bit of Ice Yellow into that previous picture. And then once that's all dry, you can go back in with some Screamer Pink and glaze it to make sure it all kind of fits together. For the teeth, we can rebuild it with Sandstone, and then we can go in with some Ice Yellow mixed in with that Sandstone to highlight them. Make sure to leave darker areas in the crevices so that way it looks nice with some contrast. And then you can finalize the teeth by taking some pure white with our previous mixture and then doing some dot highlights. Don't do just pure white because that'll be too bright and it'll overtake everything. For the goggles, I painted silver on the outside and then Relic Blue by Two Thin Coats on the inside. And then I took Black Templar Contrast and applied it over everything. And that contrast is really important because it kind of panel lines the outside while darkens the inside of that blue. I am highlighting it further, but I'm not going to show it. We're running out of time. And you can see that here as well as the base of the jacket, which is Faust Blue and Death Reaper, and the top part, which is Sky Gray by AK 3rd Gen, which will begin shading with the glaze of that Sky Gray mixed with that Faust Blue. And it's kind of the same deal that we did with the muscles. It doesn't look like it's doing much, so you're going to have to work in thin layers. And those many thin layers are really going to reward you with great blends. And as you do those layers, feel free to add more of that Frost blue in to get a darker color a little bit quicker. I know we're all impatient. I've been working on this model for a long time, so I kind of started to go a bit quicker. And while you're doing this, you do want to be careful of pooling. If it pools up too much, it might dry in this gross, ugly coffee stain look, which you can see here. Now in the studio scheme, there's some chipping on the leather jacket, and that's cool, so we're going to emulate it by taking some of that Death Reaper, very thin down, and just creating small dots. And as you apply it, it's going to look like it's heavy, but as long as you've thinned it, it'll dry very subtly. So do make sure you're not applying it just straight out of the pot. And when you're happy with all that, just go back in with your sky gray and start to rebuild that color, clean up a little bit, and return it to more of a white color than a blue tinted color. But don't go too ham and ruin all your shadow work. And once you're happy with that, you can take some pure white, add it to your sky gray, and do some final edge highlighting. And for that leather jacket, you're going to be taking your Black Templar contrast paint, thinning it down with some water, and glazing it in to create our shadows. Honestly, in my opinion, the best use of contrast paint is by glazing, so definitely experiment with them whenever you have the chance. But once again, these should be relatively subtle glazes that you will support with additional coats. And once that's all dried up, you're going to go in with pure Frost blue and begin to highlight. You might notice that the Black Templar dried kind of glossy, and contrast paints do tend to dry glossy, but as long as you seal your model, that's all not going to matter. But hey, if you don't, leather jackets themselves are glossy, so it kind of works out. Leather jackets are also textured, so when you're working on this, make sure you are using your brush strokes to create that texture. To further highlight, you can add a little bit of ice yellow into your Frost blue and, well, highlight. And once again, try to create some texture with some simple brush strokes. I'll admit at this point I was kind of over it, so it's a little bit messy. And as long as you're not painting a golden demon piece, it's okay to kind of get over it and be a little bit messier. This is definitely kind of like a show-worthy piece. Maybe not an award winner, but I did put a lot of effort into what you're seeing, but it does get tiring. Anyways, you can mix in a little bit more ice yellow and really dot highlight the leather jacket to make it pop. And I know the whole model isn't complete, but here is Wazdakka himself, the writer, done. And I am very, very proud with what I did with the skin. I think it looks amazing. I think the leather jacket's a little rough, but it looks good if you put more time and effort into it. And I think everything else looks great, and I wish I had the time to show it to you. I do plan on a part 2 where I do the motorcycle and show off the red armor, as well as kind of like how I painted the metallics, but I guess that kind of depends on viewership. I'll definitely complete the model, but recording is a little bit of a different question. I've got a lot of things to record. And here's what the model looks like at further zoom, by the way. The skin does tend to look a little bit rougher the more I zoom in, and I just wanted to show the differences. Anyways, like, subscribe, comment, and if there's a big turnout, I'll get that motorcycle part out. Regardless, catch you in the next one.